Blog Talk Radio.
All Pro Media Group Radio showcases professionals on a daily basis. Be inspired and listen to experts from around the globe share their accomplishments with you. APMG Radio, success at its finest. You're listening to APMG Radio. I'm Lucy, and today we are pleased to have back on the show Richard Green. This is our fourth interview with Richard, founder and CEO of Green Energetics and the discoverer and inventor of a technology called Infinite Ground. This novel technology can absorb static electricity without needing an electrical connection to the Earth. This is useful not only in the vacuum of outer space, but also in aviation, electronics, and many other areas. He has been awarded a patent for this technology and has other patent applications in process. So, Richard, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks again, Lucy. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. Now, are there tools on the web or elsewhere that people can use to research patents?
Yes. The first place and safest place, to me, is the U.S. Patent Office database. There are records there, the uspto.gov, and on there you can do a text search for the thing you're wanting to look at. You can look at trademarks, you can look at patents, you can even look at...
Would you say that this process that you went through is common to most forms of innovation?
Yeah, certainly technological innovation proceeds pretty much the same way. Scientific innovation, writing software is a little bit different. It's a more iterative sort of approach to doing things, at least compared to 50 years ago. Nowadays, people write software, test a little bit of code, and then go on and test it more, and then gradually scale it up. It's a different, I suppose, even if you were innovating something in art or music or something, some of the same things would happen. You do a little test and see if you like it or see if it works. And the reason I even bring those up is that even though we're talking technology in this series, there's the latest issue of the Smithsonian has 10 innovators that are electrifying your world or something. Has nothing to do with power or electricity. It's just 10 people. The Smithsonian's a huge museum with a lot of different things in it, not technology. That's just part of it. But only 4 of those people that they have featured in their magazine were technology types. The rest, someone was helping poor kids get into school, or one was a musical one, and another one was a performing arts thing or something like that. And they were, I haven't read all the articles, but they were generally being regarded as innovators because they brought something new to the game. And so in our case, as we talk about technology innovation, I think the general process is going to be the same. You have an idea, test a small form of it, especially if you're on a limited budget. If it doesn't work, tweak it, test it again, and you just keep testing until you nail it down.
Why do you think that innovation is so important?
Well, if we didn't have things like the light bulb or the telephone or radio, you're talking on the radio thanks to guys like Marconi and some others, Tesla, and we wouldn't have general progress in civilization. If the Romans used concrete, for example, that was a huge innovation, but they also used lead plumbing, which was an innovation, but it killed them. So we have to sort of be careful. But nowadays, as you've probably seen, we put into the concrete stuff called reinforcing bar. It's iron bar that adds strength to the concrete. And so if you have just plain concrete, it can crack. If you add the rebar, as it's called, it keeps it from cracking as much. So those kinds of things are sort of incremental innovations. Things like the wheel, the automobile, the steam engine, telephone, radio, those are huge leap type innovations, and those are the kinds of things I think of when I think of innovation. It's something that's really leaps and bounds above anything else that's been done. Incremental sorts of things are important, and they're vital in the case of reinforcing bar for our safety, because otherwise concrete buildings would fall down. And, we hear of earthquakes in other countries, and hundreds and thousands of people are killed because their structures fall down. Well, they're not built to the same standards as we have been building for a long time. So there are various drivers to cause innovation. One of them is just necessity. One in my case was sort of curiosity, but also a necessity. I mean, we need to be taking care of static charge. If a grain silo blows up because of a static charge, that's kind of a necessary thing. So I think that if we don't, as a species, we tend to innovate. In some countries it's encouraged, and some people just aren't. I mean, they're worried about tilling the soil or doing something with their hands, or they don't have time to think. In our case, I don't know if you've studied this at all or not, or look it up, but in the Constitution, in the first article, there's a clause that talks about establishing a right of patent and also copyright. And in the past, in England, those things were done by writ from a monarch. In the Constitution, apparently it wasn't super well argued like some of the other things that we depend upon here, but it was established. And ever since then, a patent holder has a monopoly over their own little invention as property for 20 years now from the time it's filed. So in the United States, we've held that as an important aspect of our technological growth since the beginning. And the rest of the world has benefited. And we have the transistor, the Bell's telephone. There are lots of things that were sort of being worked on at the same time, but these are the guys that we generally credit with those sorts of things. And our modern lives, our lives for the last 100 years wouldn't have been the same without these innovations.
From your experience and from what you're aware of as an inventor, do you find that most innovators are working on projects independently? Because when we think of innovation, we think of new, exciting, like you said, leaps and bounds, things that haven't been done before, which most other people don't necessarily believe in until they actually see the results of a finished product. So should innovators be prepared to do a lot by themselves at the beginning?
That's a good question. I think we've all heard the stories of how Hewlett and Packard started out in their garage, and they started out building oscilloscopes, I think it was, or some sort of test equipment, and the house is still there in Palo Alto, and Steve Jobs' house is still in Palo Alto, and he and Steve Wozniak started building their Apple One in that garage. There's just as much. There's far more patents, for example, issued by IBM and Bell Labs and AMD and Intel and all those folks, large industries, huge numbers of patents being generated by them for very, very specific sorts of things. Some of them are huge. The iPhone, for example, putting a touch screen like that on a phone and all the different things that they did was truly innovative. But it took a lot of people to make it happen. Alexander Graham Bell had himself and his assistant, and when Bell spilled acid because of how the experiment was going, a little bit of acid on his leg, he yelled for Watson to come into the room, and Watson heard it in the other room. That's how the telephone was proof tested. Others like, let's go back again to Marconi, let's say, doing wireless transmissions across the Atlantic required someone on the other end to be able to receive it. So I have no idea about the proportions of patents. I would imagine, I know people that have had hundreds of patents that are under their name. Whether they did them all themselves or were with a company was sort of a mix. The guy, I can't remember his name, that invented the Super Soaker was an engineer of some sort and wanted to invent a way to have a more exciting squirt gun experience, and so he played with different things it's all history's on the internet for, of course, with his kitchen sink, and figured out a way to pump air into a chamber and have it push the water out more thoroughly. And he got several patents to his name, and he did it all by himself. I think your question is really good because there's sort of a romance around the lone inventor working in their garage or their office and coming up with this really cool thing. And I've been inventing since I was a kid, so it's just sort of built into me. It's not ingrained in everybody.
I want to know what inspires you on an everyday basis.
I was educated as a scientist, as a biochemist, and did scientific work for a long time. And in that discipline, there's a lot of repetitiveness. And because you have to do an experiment, do it again, change one variable, do it again, do it 6 times, 7 times, and then you change the variable. And found I got very bored. It's probably borderline ADD or something. So I think that, but even then, even in the midst of doing that, or in the midst of school, kids daydream, right? And most of those daydreams were how to do something a little differently. And I think partly I'm just wired that way. And I see something and say, I mean, not all the time. I would be too distracted by squirrels and shiny things. So I'm not that bad. But I do think if something doesn't work right on a car or something like that, or a bicycle, and you say, gee, what if we did something different that way? And so that's sort of how you can ask yourself that question, even if you're not sort of wired to be innovative or creative in that fashion. You can just say, well, how can we do this better? How can we improve the process or do something like that? When I was a kid, I wore glasses, and I thought, why not make eyeglasses that had windshield wipers on them for rain? And someone had already patented that actually in like 1890 or something. I couldn't believe it. But I'm not sure. I think the inspiration just sort of hits me sometimes, and it's if I'm driving down the highway or listening to the radio, I don't necessarily think about stuff like that. But it does. So it's not an everyday occurrence. But in that sense, it's just how can we do something better? I guess that's
creation. So how can people contact you for more information or if they have any questions?
Probably the best would be info at Green, Green dash or hyphen energetics energetics.com, and that would be the easiest way to do.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you again. It's been fun. Thanks.
You've been listening to APMG Radio with my special guest, Richard Green. This show and many others can be found at allpromediagroup.com. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Lucy, and you've been listening to APMG Radio. All Pro Media Group Radio showcases professionals on a daily basis. Be inspired and listen to experts from around the globe share their accomplishments with you. APMG Radio, success at its finest.